Hey guys, Stealth here. How about a good old 10v10 today for Subscriber Saturday? It's going to be a bit of an unusual 10v10 though. The map is something that you don't see that often. This is Final Meltdown, named after the reactor down in the middle of the map. And what else is special about this map, or about this specific gameplay, is that it's a 10v10 using only, and I say only, armor decks. So we're going to see a massive amount of tanks, and tanks supporting units. And for example, over here you can see a lot of infantry being spawned in. Mostly Dutch infantry, some German infantry and Marder 2s. And considering that there's basically 2 or 3 avenues of approach, we're going to see a lot of tank clashes, or at least that would be my prediction. Hotel is covered by a couple of bridges on each end. Driving around Gulf is not really recommended, it just takes forever. And you're bottlenecked at this bridge, both red and blue. The middle of the map, lots of infantry opportunity, and you can see that there are so many separate structures that this is usually a place where infantry just goes to die. Then you have Lima, once again, several bridges, but also a more strategic bridge toward the middle of the map. And then over on the left, the same problem for red and blue, but in reverse. Just one bridge, one route, and not a lot of cover for the tanks short of those tree lines. Now with just armored decks, that doesn't mean that everybody is just using tanks. Defending against units like helicopters is just as important. That's why you can see a whole lot of AA going up. Cheetahs, C2 Mexes, Stormers, ADATs, everything is surrounding the tanks in order to prevent them from getting murdered instantly. Now this is of course not the only spawn, we also have a group starting over here. And there's just so many vehicles that it's hard to figure out which is which. Looks like a Eurocore armor deck. This is Spooky Toast, as well as Double Odd Buck. I'm seeing MX-32 Brennis, 2A4s, 1A5s, Leclerc. We got the 2A5 even. And then towards the right, it is... this is going to cause some major traffic issues here. Chieftain Mark 11s, Leopard 1 and O, Wildcats, 1A5, Spartans, Challenger 2s. A pattern that I am seeing is that there's not too many super heavies. People are not going to risk their super heavy tanks just yet. It seems like most people are currently going with, let's say, medium or subpar tanks. Along the lines of the Brennis, the Chieftains, Leopard 1 and O. It's like they're putting up a big meat shield, but without the actual firepower to use that meat shield. I'd say the best tank I've seen so far is the 2A5, but that was on the left flank, and the right flank just doesn't have that much. Now it's a replay that's going to last an hour. I won't let it last that long, I'll be probably skipping here and there. Because, let's face it, who watches a 1 hour YouTube video? Not many people do that. Dash Forward by British Helos combined with a Gazelle AH-1, which I believe is... oh, actually it is the British one. I always mess this up, but I usually consider that the French one, which also uses the Gazelle. TOW 2s. But if the TOW 2s run into a similar engagement like the Hawk Heos and the Cheetahs, then this is going to be a pretty short war. The middle, skirmishing between Mi-24Ds and Apache escorts. All of these brought forward by Char and Znabel. And they're actually making short work of most of these Mi-24Ds, which of course are helicopters there to transport troops. So hopefully they've been able to kill those off before they dropped off the troops. Otherwise, the infantry heading towards the middle, there is quite a bit of that going around, is going to have an even harder time. The initial battle is going to be fought by helicopters. Fastest units, and especially considering the fact that tanks are mechanized and only do 110 on road, it's going to take a while. So Cassiopei's going to work on the Mi-24, easily wiping it out. Mi-4As are up next. They have virtually no defense against the autocannons, as their machine gun is only really effective, I believe, at 500 meter range. And here's Red. Lots of MTLBVs. I'm seeing, what's that, a PT-76 possibly? And Red is also joining Blue in the middle of the map. We have a whole column of tanks coming in. And I hope somebody remembered to bring the cluster bombs, because those are going to be invaluable and can do a massive amount of damage. Now it's just like I'm looking at caterpillars on the minimap. Look at this train here. I think that the word lemming train is well deserved. And all of this is going towards hotel. I'm not sure where you're going to park it all. Where you're going to park it all in cover, that is. I mean, just look at this line. This is just... this is just tanks bumper to bumper. Oh, this is going to cause some issues on the bridge. So far pathfinding seems... Nope. I was going to say so far pathfinding seems to be working, but we have a bit of an engagement. This is what you get when you have 16 strikers firing at once. Usually 1 or 2 hit and the other 14 miss. They're all separated. Possibly to start dispersing them, I don't know. T-64 BVIs coming in force. Sorry, actually BV-1. T-64 BVs do have the HEGM, the Agona. T-80A have the HEGM. T-80UMs coming in. And this is just one big slaughter of all the strikers. This is what I was worried about. Blue does not have an answer to all of those heavies, as their own tanks are really not that heavy. It would be nice though if all of these chieftains could come out of the woodworks and start putting up some firepower as well. But just... look at that, that's the bridge blocked off. This is going to take tanks quite a while to force their way through, in which they're going to be very, very vulnerable. Look at that, some of these things are almost falling off the bridge, or at least they should be. Center of mass is so far on the outside that they should be just leaping off the bridge like lemmings. Over on the left, we have another big engagement, and Blue seems to have made a bit more progress here. Commandos have taken up position in this town over here. But will it do them any good is the question. And I really don't believe so. Because while the Commandos 90 are nice units, they're going to need to get all of these units up close in order to do some damage. They've already taken a massive amount of battering, causing them to get very, very panicked, losing a lot of forces and especially losing a lot of their firepower in the process. The middle of the map is of course not exempt of battle either. Leopard 2A5s squaring off against an overwhelming force of Red 4 tanks. T-90S, T-80B, T-72 OBR 1989, a couple of tank destroyers are rolling in, and unfortunately it seems that the infantry has to be offloaded early, not actually making it all the way to the town. The Dutch forces have managed to make it to the town, and are now putting fire on the ZSD-90s, but the Zanshis are already released. They are taking a position next to the Stoottroepen, and while they're getting fire support from the 50 cals, I don't think... No, actually they're not causing that much of a mess for the Stoottroepen. They seem to be not actually doing any damage whatsoever. Some damage to the Marder 2s, but again they're not putting up enough fire. There's one 50 cal transport that goes down, but they just got wiped out. Once again, why I personally use duo stacking of infantry, never quad stacks. They're just too easy to panic all at once. Harrier GR7 is going to get its hands full, but it's only going to be able to take out one unit at a time. I gotta say that this 10 armor decks would be an ideal hunting ground, provided you have air control, for the Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt, Su-25T, Su-25K, units that are very, very dedicated to killing tanks, provided that they're not going to get challenged too much from the air, should have a pretty easy time and a pretty good time racking up the points. Talking about points, looks like Taru is bringing in the big guys, and although I don't think they're going to be doing that much damage to the tanks, they will be panicking and stunning some of them. But let's face it, a B5 is not the best weapon if you want to get a kill on the tank. Stunning it? Absolutely. That will definitely work. Killing it off? Not so much. It simply doesn't do enough damage. But stunning of course does help, because with the stunned tanks, the T-72BU on the right will have an easier time taking out the survivors. A couple of MI-24Ps coming in, and it looks like without the fire support from the Stormers, they're going to be losing a lot of super heavies on this end, especially due to the Kokon M mounted on the VP. The Kokon M deals much more of a blow to the tank than the MI-24P, which just has the Kokon and carries 4 of them. This one carries 8, which is much more destructive power. Another, I think, 2A5 was destroyed. Challenger 2 is pushing back, or pulling back. And with a map this big, with tanks coming in from Charlie and all the way back here in Alpha, it's going to take a lot of fuel to get to the front line. Especially consider that most tanks, at least that's what I heard from the tank event a couple weeks ago, tanks tend to eat up 4 liters of fuel per kilometer that they're driving. Now it will depend on speed, terrain, type of tank and stuff like that, but taking about 4 liters per fuel per click, or almost a gallon of fuel per kilometer traveled, is, well, it's going to eat into your supplies. And they do have a decent amount of fobs. I'm seeing 2 here, which are also going to get eaten into by the M110s. Over towards the right, 1, 2 fobs, and that's it. 3 fobs. Once again, a big red 4 blob coming up against the right. And they have to drive around, because this bridge is blocked off. And it's this is just ridiculous. The sheer amount of T-80s that got knocked out here. Wow. How's the left bridge? Left bridge might still be traversable, although a lot of Leopard 1 corpses are cluttering this bridge up as well. Especially the middle part's going to be a problem. I don't think that these bridges are going to have the same issues, because it's much more difficult to get a good firing position early on. Same here, I'm not seeing any wrecks. And it seems that Blue is able to push through fast enough that both of these bridges are safe. They're not actually cluttered, and they can still be used by either party to keep traversing units into the battlefield. A couple of Sturm S's coming in. Quite dangerous units, although they do only use the Kokon missile, so it's the 20 armor penetration power, not the 22 that the Mi-24 VP was carrying earlier here. Of course, the tanks aren't the only thing that's doing damage. The fire support units and the AA units are taking a lot of fire from artillery, and in a match like this, they're actually quite high value targets. Because it's easier to take out supporting units and then come in with a couple of aircraft than it is to just slug it out tank on tank. It's not the most effective use of your resources. Red seems to have a pretty good air patrol going over Gulf. Yak 141s, Su-27PU, and they're all there to back up the tanks here that are pushing in from Comrade Caspiro, who's using quite an expensive assortment of units, which are going to get mauled by these 2 Harriers, which, surprisingly, seemingly attacked the same tank. I don't think that there's 2 wrecks here, just 1. Bit of a waste of resources there. You could have taken out both T-80Us, presumably. But apparently priorities were others, or were otherwise. TOW 2 comes in. I'm only seeing a bunch of tanks moving about. So this is a perfect strike target, I'd say, for a Thunderbolt, provided that the air patrol there is not on station. You can see these things are dashing back and forth. Some of them are panicked after taking a bit of fire. Most of them are going to be probably pressed for gas. They already took a large drive, and unless they got a top off in Gulf, these things are going to be burning fuel pretty fast. T-80U, autonomy 450, 700, these guys won't have a problem. 64BV 680, and the T-72BU at 700 clicks, meaning that the T-80Us are only going to be the ones that might be in fuel trouble. Phew. All the ATGMs being wasted on just 2 chieftains there. Another air patrol comes up. Or is it? I think it's an air patrol. There's another air patrol. They really get worried about all of the Blue 4 aircraft that might come in and challenge the push over here. But there is some AA here, but Tukushka M's getting back into cover. And it looks like they might be trying to drop off infantry, presumably towards the hillside here. So if you have a recon unit over there, you can see what Blue is bringing in. As far as points go, the score is pretty similar. 16,000 for Blue, rounded up, versus 13,000 for Red. Whereas you would normally expect Red to have the better tanks. At least with all the ATGMs that they're fielding, I consider the Red 4 tanks to be a bit better than the Blue 4 ones. And especially on open terrain like this, the Red 4 tanks really have no excuse to not do well with their ATGMs. The player that I'm following, by the way, is the one who sent it in, Xcro3. And he's using what seems to be either South Korean... No, it's Blue Dragon's deck. Kiyomarushikis, he's using them in teams of 2. There's the K1A1 here as well. And considering his score of 3,254 points, he's doing quite nice. But he is being challenged here by a lot of Motostrelki 90. The Stormers are trying to put a bit of suppressive fire on them, but they can do little else but that. They're going to need quite a bit of fire support in order to survive, which does not happen. But this should even that out a bit. Peace Pheasant, look at that. Wipes out 5 squads, 1 squad of survivors. These guys have balls of steel as they're not even panicked, despite just seeing 50 guys got wiped out by 1 bombing run. 086 standing by to cover this bridge, at least with eyes. We have a couple of Pip 3s, which I believe are slightly too far behind at this point. Considering their range, I'd say this might be a better position for them. Kiyomarushikis taking on supplies, taking on new ammunition, and taking on some repairs from these Shirasagi transports. Let's see how the ones on the left are doing. I think he lost one of them. I believe that was a team of 2, but no longer. Looks like they are slowly but steadily making progress on this hilltop. Let's see what Red has. Yep, one little Razvedka guy left here. Climbing up the hill by himself, moonwalking forward, trying to get up the hill. If that's how you can climb mountains, then by all means go ahead. But he must be feeling pretty lonely, seeing probably most of his comrades die to napalm. Let's have a look at the Red 4 composition here. This is the Tank 4 that we saw earlier. They have been refueled by the Urals. They have a very, very powerful assortment of AA standing by. I don't think I've ever seen 16 Cub M's this close together. These are really, really expensive missiles too. 9 HE missiles, quite expensive to rearm. Range 3800. And I believe that goes for all of them. There's just a different carrier. But these can put up so much firepower that you're going to be wasting them regardless. So from Shredder, a whole fleet of Mi-4 cargos is coming in to resupply all of these. Not just with fuel, but with missiles as well. And I gotta say, this would be one beautiful target for either artillery or siege aircraft. Because you're looking at a stack of 180 points per squadron of Cub M's. So really, really pricey target there. Interesting play here. Putting the mortars on the island. In case you're wondering how they got there, they are amphibious. You can just swim them over. I wouldn't personally look for artillery on an island. I would get artillery, I'd be looking towards Gulf, maybe over there, possibly towards the back if it's a big gun. But he's just putting them on the island, which is clever, providing fire support in a pretty nice area of influence here. And making them more likely to survive, as it's not likely for infantry to stumble upon them. Red is once again pushing on blue over on the left. The red side seems to be a bit more relaxed. I'd say that most of the engagement is going on over here. A couple of aircraft flying over, easily getting shot down. And suddenly, a whole horde of, I believe, Swedish tanks have arrived. STRV 105s from Blur. Marder VTS 1s coming in. More STRV 105s and M116 for reconnaissance. And there is another train en route. We have automatics, Marder VTS, more AA units, and a couple of K1s from X-Crowd himself. Look at all these big guns firing. M1110. I haven't actually seen one fire. I did see one drive around. They are really, really impressive weapons. Just imagine having one of those things fire and standing next to it. And I presume that some of you may have, as I believe some of my subscribers have military service. And I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of one of those shells. Let's see what he's trying to hit. Possibly doing some counter-artillery. There's another round. Going in. I'd say he might be trying to kill off some of the MSTAs. And getting a good hit on them too. These things are pretty well armored though. At 5 frontal armor and 3 side, but against firepower along this magnitude, they're not going to take that much to actually get blown up. They're quite expensive, 130 points. But the point value isn't the most important thing here. I'd say that getting these guns off of your AA is much more of a strategic objective than destroying the artillery itself. That's more along the lines of a tactical objective. Alright, seems like a standoff to me. Nobody is actually moving. Somebody's saying, I think I blocked it. I'm not sure if that was intended. But these vehicles are going to take some pushing in order to get out of the way. Although a tank could probably weasel its way through there. Let's switch back to X-Crowd to unclutter the minimap a little bit. There, all of Red 4 has disappeared. Let's put it at a bit of a higher pace. Reservists being used as cannon fodder / force reconnaissance here. Not really doing too much of a job there. As I think the North Force is spotting most everything that is coming this way. A couple more vehicles, T-64 BVs. It seems that there is no end to the Russian reserves of these tanks. They just keep coming in and in and in. Of course, you are dealing with 10 different players. I wouldn't be surprised if half of them took the USSR armored deck, because at least in my mind those have the best tanks. And it's, well, it's very, very possible to have a lot of these tanks in your deck. They're 120 points. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a destruction game with a high income, so that you're actually going to be able to field a lot of these tanks, because a server like this is set up to have as many tanks as possible. And tanks are expensive. The T-64 BV, the one I just showed you, 120 points. The Challenger 2s, of course, the Khmer Shikis, all of these tanks are really, really expensive. Nanion Shiki G, not so much, at 60 points. And these, if they are lucky, can take out some of the higher value units. But still, you want to be able to field something more impressive, so that's the high value income. Or at least, I expect it to be. Bit of an engagement going on from Buck, pushing forward. Paleon decides to surrender. Now, keep in mind that while you may see people surrender, I wouldn't be surprised if some PCs are moaning and groaning under the pressure of all of these units that they have to render. I don't encounter it myself very often, but sometimes you just get kicked out of a game because your computer is not up to snuff. There are so many units that you just cannot keep up, and that's when Wargame says, okay, if you cannot keep up, then we're going to kick you from the game, in order for the others to keep playing. Quite the tank offensive going up here, by the way. Spooky Toast is pushing, but getting repulsed by some of the tanks that are entrenched in this tree line. I think they did quite a bit of damage, but he's taken a good number of hits on his tanks and is pulling back in order to get these things repaired. It's a good example of a push that would probably work best. If you just keep going, then you're more likely to lose these tanks, and the 2A4 is not that, or does not have that much availability. It depends on what kind of deck composition you're using, but I believe Spooky Toast was the one using the Eurocore. In that case, I think you can get 2 cards. Let's say 10 tanks and probably 8 at a higher veterancy. Looks like a Buratino may have been fired at this position. Not really sure what they've been able to kill off. Slow this down a bit. There's another salvo or another flight, or what do you call that? Tank squadron? Tank platoon? Yeah, I think that's the word. Tank platoon. Tank platoon of T-64 BMs comes in. Some of them take hits from what seems to be the TOW-2s. The TOW-2s dashing forward hoping to get the kill. And a missile goes and doesn't hit. At some point Red Force AA is going to respond to this. There it is, Tunguska, and no more helicopter. Missile flies in, completely goes off course, naturally. TUA does not seem to have a good line of sight. And all of these tree lines can be really nasty for your line of sight. It can be really quite difficult to keep good spots on targets. See if the right has seen any change. No, still a couple of dashes, but nothing else. What is going on is that blue seems to have lost their tree line position that they had initially. They have still a high number of tanks over on the right. Look at this. Whoa. You ever see this? A quad stack of Challenger 2s? You know you're in a tank match when? A quad stack of Challenger 2s. Alright. And the Challengers, as well as the 2A5s, are pushing. Can they get some of these high-value targets out of the way before they are forced to retreat? The one thing that does worry me is that they're pushing without seemingly having a lot of air support. There's 2 Challenger marksmen coming up, but they're too far behind for them to actually be effective. Chieftain's pushing up. Chieftain, of course, being one of those terrible off-road tanks. 45 kph. The rest of the tank's good. No bad things about that. 14 armor, 19 armor penetration, 60% accuracy. It's a good gun and a good weapons platform. But the chassis? Oh, 45 kph off-road in a, what is it, desert-like environment where there's not too many roads, you're gonna notice that. It makes you a sitting duck for units like the Su-25T, units like the Akula and the Mi-28. They're gonna come in, they're gonna say, oh look, a sitting Chieftain Mark 11. You might be trying to reverse at 45, but I'm coming at you at almost 300 kph. And the Su-25T even faster, of course. At which pace they're going to completely eat you up. Now the point difference is still there. Blue is still ahead by about 4,000 points. But they are not gaining a lot of advantage. Sure, they're gaining some ground here. But there's a lot of terrain between where they are now and where they want to go. So I don't see them getting there anytime soon. Let's speed it up a bit, because I think that blue is building up for another offensive. Looks like they still have a good number of units in reserve here. Blur is bringing in the PNMK with the autocannons. I'm not sure why you'd want to have this many PNMKs. He's possibly building up a force over on the north here. Yep, Leopard 1A3 DKs. Now these things might not have a fantastic gun. 16 AP is not going to go through the front of a Soviet heavy or a super heavy. But if you bring these out in significant numbers, then they're going to get close enough to actually start to do damage. That damage is going to ramp up, because the STRV 105 does have a decent rate of fire of 8 rounds a minute, and it is very accurate. You just have to get close in order to get through the frontal armor of, let's say, the BV, or the T-72BU, or the T-80U. And not even that close. T-80U has, I believe, 20 frontal armor. These things have 16 points of penetration, so they need to get a bit closer, but not terribly close, in order to get a kill on a 150 point tank. Hachi Kiyoshiki trying to gain some terrain, and it looks like they are succeeding in that. Liugarden pushing up as well, mostly there as a holding force. Challenger 2 rolling up as well. Looks like they got plenty of AA defenses around this position, but I'm not seeing that much reconnaissance. There's one Alouette, but I'm not seeing any reconnaissance towards this end, where you could possibly get a recon team, such as a sniper team positioned in the tree line. T-80U and the T-80BV are for some reason still sitting out here. I don't think that General... what is that? General East? Yeah, General East has left. So he should be there and micromanaging his tanks a bit further than that. There we go, he's pulling back. Damn it, Kevin has surrendered, or at least left. That's another red 4. I think we've seen Dexter leave. Damn it, Kevin, Palayan. From blue, I'm not sure. I think I saw some of them go. X-Groat, at this point, has racked up a score of 6,000 points. And is solely operating on this flank. Oh dear. Did you see that? Unfortunately, it was moving a bit too fast. But at least 2 Su-25Ts and an Su-27M came in. And the entire Danish group, Danish-Swedish group that we saw there is dead. There's just nothing left. That's the work of the Su-25T, if you unleash it on a terrain where there's not too much AA cover. And there was not a lot of AA cover. Once again, a dash with the T-80UMs, getting out of cover, firing the Invar missiles, hopefully getting a hit on the Leopard 2A4s, trying to weaken them and deter them from pushing, which is succeeding. And then once you have done enough damage, you pull back. While these things can fire on the move, they do need line of sight, and that seems to be a problem at the moment. On the right flank, the attack with all of the challengers... Please don't... oh, there they are. All the challengers are still alive, and in really good operating condition as well. And they're now pushing on all of these Red 4 units. All of the Cub M's from Shredder seems to be running as fast as they possibly can. And of course the Challenger 2 does take damage from an ATGM, but they have so much frontal armor that they can take up a beating like this and keep going for quite a while. Some of them are taking way too many missiles. One's down to 3 hit points. Actually, I should be looking at it from this perspective. This is way better, of course. In on the action. They're parked in the tree line. Are they still detected? No, some of them are blinking, so they're no longer detected. And to get these boys repaired and ready for the next dash, putting pressure on Comrade Caspiro with all of his tanks there. Su-27M looks like they're on air patrol, hoping to get a hit on some of these challengers. Instead, presumably getting some hits on the Chieftain Mark 11s, which are, well, more or less being sacrificed in a sort of meat shield role. What was that? Jaguar GR1 came in, immediately getting wiped out by all of the AA that is still in this area, but Red is definitely on the run. And the Challenger marksmen are deterring the enemy helicopters that are considering a counteroffensive. Chieftain Mark 11s, as well as a Challenger 2 from Miner 69 are pushing forward, getting some damage. And these T-72BUs, as well as the T-80Us, are definitely no longer as confident as they were before when they were still doing dashes seemingly unopposed. I I gotta say, you gotta love the British at work. British armor units are just such capable tanks. They may not have the best gun. They may not be the fastest. But that frontal armor of 20 or even 23 for the Challenger is just so good that it's going to stay alive. I'm not going to say no matter what, but it's going to stay alive far longer than most other tanks would. I am a bit worried about Resurrec here, as well as Miner 69er, because they seem to be outstretching themselves a bit. There's one AA unit and one recon and little else. Miner 69er bringing in a resupply, not just to repair his own Challenger, but presumably also to put fuel in the Chieftains. They still need a bit of help there. A lot of help markers going up on the left. Excroat is looking at this and getting quite worried. Words coming in, rushing in against the Cassiopes from Spooky Toast. My 24 VP with a Gushka 30k. 30mm cannon easily wipes it out. KF-16 does not do a very good run with a gun like... No, it doesn't have any short-range missiles either. He's probably going to come around. Or is he? Yep. Will he get a good gun run is the question. Coming in close. No. Gun running, at least in my mind, rarely works. I just cannot really seem to get a good result with it. KF-16C, maybe, but they again carry medium to long range missiles, not short range. The Eurofighter does carry short range missiles, the M9M, and it should be capable of getting a hit. Yes, hit succeeded. Come around. Peace Ryan also has short range and gets the kill. There we go. Helicopter incursion terminated. Blue 4 still pushing forward, but at the expense of points. 31,000 versus 29,500. The difference suddenly is not as big as it was anymore. Blue 4 is sacrificing points in order to gain terrain. And of course you gotta sacrifice something, but is terrain really that valuable? It is destruction, so terrain is not as valuable as it is in Conquest. Of course, strategically you can say it's really valuable, but points-wise, maybe not so much, as they're only separated by 1,500 points at this stage. Over towards the right, there's still a lot of Red 4 transports and medium to super heavies. The T-80U I consider pretty much an edgy unit at I believe 150 points. These are quite valuable. I consider them super heavies to heavies at this stage. T-80UK from Schwedor. Not sure why you'd want to use a 200 point tank as a frontline unit, but okay. You probably didn't really have another role for it. Tornado GR1 does have another role for it, as very expensive scrap metal. And it looks like he gets the kill. There's the cluster bombs going in. The enemy teams own 70% of points. 30,000 versus 1,600. This game can still go either way. But I think that blue is currently doing a bit better. It really depends on how far they can push on the right, because there's still a lot of points to be had here without too much of an effort. And this is, of course, a bit closer to blue 4 spawn than it is to red 4. At least... No, is it? No, actually, red 4 seems to have an easier time resupplying and reinforcing this route than blue 4 does. It's closer to the air spawn for red, and it's closer to the ground spawn, because the ground forces have to go over the bridge and drive south, whereas the blue 4 units come in from Alpha. They have a long drive ahead of them before they're ever going to reach Gulf and hopefully not die there. Reservic stalwarts have arrived, getting ready to resupply and repair these Challenger 2s. This is going to... That's 3,500 points of supplies. Gone in 20 seconds, if that. Of course, all of these tanks are mighty hungry. And 3,200 or 3,200 points of supply is not really going to do it. Red 4 closing in even further. The difference is just 1,200 points now. That's a far cry from what it used to be at 3,000. And they have them on the run. But again, Red 4 is putting up a hell of a scorched earth fight. And causing all sorts of Blue 4 losses before they're ever going to give up this terrain. Apache Escort kills a T-64, probably with the use of rocket pods. And this BMP-T I don't think is going to stand much of a chance against the combined forces that are pushing on it. Although it does have a nice amount of armor and is quite capable of engaging an Apache Escort at short range with an autocannon. There we go, the Apache Escort is taking fire, dishing it out. But instead going for the poorly armored tanks there that are trying to float back home. In the meanwhile, it's still taking a lot of fire. And while this one does have 2 points of armor penetration, it's trying to go through the frontal armor of a BMP-T, which is 15. So unless it gets the back or the top armor, it's not likely to go through and penetrate the armor. Unless it gets really, really, really close. And therefore being pulled back. Resurrec is asking if anyone has the RT power to go after these units. One MI4 worth 25 points. So this is going to really rack up the points, provided that you can hit them. Sending in a Sea Harrier. Looks like either the AA's turned off or dead. Either. A lot of Mi-24As there. Once again, decent targets, 45 points apiece, and really, really easy grinder stuff for the Chieftain Marksman, the Challenger Marksmans. You can see Resurrec is taking his time here, resupplying and repairing those Challenger 2s. This is not a force that you just want to dash forward and hope for the best. This is worth 4 times 170 points. And we've seen what happened to a much more sizable force on the other end when those SU-25Ts came over. Imagine what they can do if they only have a couple of Challengers to fire at. Of course, the Challenger Marksman will deter from flying over for too long. But I still would not want to be around with a couple of Challenger 2s for too long if the SU-25T flies over. Looks like this bridge is not quite as blocked off as they'd expected. Or we're no longer seeing the units, whichever it is. Looks like a BTRT there with a grenade launcher and a machine gun. The Panzer Skeete not having a good time pushing forward. They're getting in range. There's the kill. But it took them at least one group before they got close enough. And the second part is going to be even more difficult. Although I think that's... was that T-34? That's an elite T-34-85. 15 points, 50 kph, 400 kilometers autonomy. It does, however, have a 3HE gun, so it will hurt the infantry. The right seems pretty quiet at this stage. So does the left. So let's push it up a bit. And see if this is going to turn into a victory or a draw. They're almost 2,000 points ahead again. There's another 25 points. Norov's T-80. Ooh, look at that. That's 600 points sitting right there. The question is, can Blue 4 take that group out? If they can, that could make the difference in getting it either to a victory or a draw. Looks like Shredder is going to sacrifice some more T-34-85s here. Stovetruppen doing some damage. Not even getting a single kill with those T-34-85 short of the recon unit there. And the British are on the move. Challenger 1 Mark IIIs Challenger marksman as well. Holy moly. That's where all the units are. He's intentionally blocking the bridge. Is he though? Could anyone get a cluster bomb on that? What does he have there? Slow down. Yep, T-34-85s. He is hoping, as was quite accurately estimated, that he's hoping that the Challengers push up and take out all of these T-34s so that they block the bridge and can no longer push forward. Of course, this is going to be an absolute slaughter if those Challenger 2s or even the 1 Mark 1s get their hands on them. Which doesn't happen. Artillery fires, does a lot of damage, kills off the first 2 T-34s there, almost blocking off the bridge. The more mass is on this bridge, the more difficult it will be for the Challengers to push through. Another cluster bomb comes in. That was a bad run. Dropping cluster bombs on 15-point tanks and then losing your aircraft is really not worth it. Especially if you see that all of the Challenger 1 Mark 3s are over there. Red Force still has a whole load of units here. T-34-85s as far as the eye can see. Now, keep in mind that Shredder is one of the, I think, few players left on red. And that gives him a lot more availability than would normally have. The T-34-85 is already a unit that you have a lot of. If that availability gets boosted, then you can just keep fielding these tanks basically ad infinitum. Points 2,000 in advantage for blue. And, oh, they actually managed to push the T-34s out of the way. There's even some sneaky 34-85 1969s, which do have a better gun. No, actually it's the same tank, never mind. They seem to have gotten some side shots on the 1 Mark 3, but not even getting that much damage in. Su-27M's flying over. Shredder is asking for help in order to stop all of these blue 4 units. Not likely to happen. And finally the Challenger marksmen arrive to shoot down the Su-27M. Not quite getting the hit. And here's the Su-25T. Some damage going in. Challenger 2's not getting hit yet. Can they hit him? Yep, there's the kill. Challengers taking some damage, but with that the game is almost ended. And I don't think that they have too much time to actually get these units into the zone. Now I love the Challenger marksman, but this thing just does not have ammo stores that are big enough. It just has 500 rounds apiece, which will kill several helos. But against aircraft, they're not as effective, and they're going to just burn their ammo. And, yep, as expected, it's a draw. The difference between red and blue was not big enough. 36,695 for blue, 33,770 for red. So they didn't quite get enough point difference in there to make it a victory. Terrain-wise, I'd say that it is a victory for blue. They just got way more terrain in the end than red did. But definitely interesting to see all of those tanks clash together. I haven't played one of these matches myself, but it is interesting to see them. And I hope you enjoyed that display of armor. Unfortunately, no real clear-cut line of the kills from X-Crowd, considering that I switched to neutral and that messes up the replay system. Still, lots and lots of armor. I especially liked seeing the 4 Challenger 2s at work, the large tank pushes from red and then dashing back to cover. And it's just that these games, I find some of the most fun in Wargame. Because they're, I don't know, they're casual in a way. They're casual, they're still tense, but not as tense as 1v1s, tacticals, or ranked. Anyway, with that, it's the end of the video. Thank you for watching. I hope you had fun, and I'll see you soon for more Wargame.